Arup, welcome to the Nonstop Nonprofit Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to learn more about your business. Sounds like you're providing a great product to nonprofits, which we obviously both care about. And so maybe just before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what your company does.
Sure, absolutely. So my background specifically is in computer science, finance. I actually worked in venture capital, growth equity. After I went to business school, it was all about data, though. And so anytime I looked at the investment landscape or I looked at organizations that were trying to understand either their own data sets or being able to augment their own data sets with external data, most organizations were just simply not data-driven. And so my goal and my mission post-MBA world was to really try and solve that, whether that was through business intelligence, mapping out different data sets, but really the key aspect behind any organization is putting that data within workflows. So Windfall, what we do is that we are a data and people intelligence platform, and effectively what we do is we provide wealth screening, propensity modeling, and audiences for net new acquisition. So really capturing the fundraising environment for the nonprofit and empowering them to be much more data-driven within the constructs of their existing ecosystem or their tech stack.
Got it. Wow. And so are nonprofits, is it the only segment that you guys sell into today, or are you more broad than nonprofits?
Yeah, so nonprofits is the core of our business. We have been doing that since our inception in June of 2016. We do have some other customers in similar industries as well,
Okay.
like financial services, who effectively are targeting exactly similar folks to those in our nonprofit communities as well. But nonprofits represent about 95% of our customers.
Okay. So tell me, I always like to know, the founder's why behind, especially starting a business that's selling to nonprofits.
Sure.
What's your why? What was the inspiration? And you kind of shared it with your background, but what was your inspiration to build something specifically for nonprofits?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different things. One, I was always pretty active in volunteering when I was growing up, and so there was a lot of different challenges that I saw when I was volunteering and effectively helping put on events, fundraise, reach out to folks. That actually helped me understand a little bit more about the workflow or process that folks actually go into. I got actually my MBA at Berkeley, so social impact is one of our key tenets as an institution, and really resonated with me when I decided to go to that school. And it really left a huge element of appreciation for, I think, this community. And what I saw was that a lot of folks, kind of similar to old B2B software, where most software that was new and shiny was built for consumers but not for businesses. Well, that wasn't what I really saw in the nonprofit organizations. Everybody was using 30, 40-year-old technologies, and it was pretty crazy. But now, I think over the last 6 years, there's been a lot of new companies that have actually come out and said, no, this is one of the largest sectors in the country, and there's a lot of professionals here, and it's pretty much overlooked for a lot of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I started fundraising in 2014. And when we went to raise our seed rounds, investors were saying, "Wait, nonprofit industry, is it a market?" And then fast forward to today, how many transactions have happened? How much capital's gone into the nonprofit industry? It's really quite amazing, and it's an exciting time, I think, to be operating a business in this vertical.
For sure, 100%. Yeah, I think that's the spot on. I think a lot of the folks out there will probably say you can shed this part of your business because there's other opportunities. But I do believe that, just to kind of add on to that, there's a lot more excitement about how we can help and how there is a lot more sophistication that's going into the overall ecosystem.
Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about some of the core kind of wins a nonprofit would get from a product like Windfall. What's the core kind of use case? What are, or even maybe it's a case study that you can share about a specific customer where they implemented your guys' technology and saw X as a result?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll probably talk about the three different product offerings that we had talked about. So the first is our wealth screening product. When we got started, net worth was a bad word. So nobody wanted to use net worth. They didn't believe it. It was all about gift capacity. And we came out and said, nope, we're going to actually give you a precise figure. We'll say John Smith's worth $2.3 million versus Jane Doe worth $49.9 million instead. We refresh our data every week, and we also don't charge on credit, so we want you to use us as frequently as you'd like. And so that was very, very different for a lot of organizations who might have done wealth screening every 3 years or only to the top 10% of their population. So they're missing tons of hidden gems. So some of our use cases that we've recently seen associated with wealth screening is that we're finding anywhere between 40 to 50% net new prospects that they had never looked at within their database. And we even have some situations where utilizing our data for somebody that was a donor who gave $100, $500, as soon as they started to cultivate, steward it through it, that's a $50,000 donor. And so we do have some case studies on this with Make-A-Wish, Arizona in particular, who actually use our secondary product, which is propensity to give modeling. So we layer on artificial intelligence, machine learning, to not only say, hey, is this person wealthy, but will they give? And what is the use case for giving? Is it major gifts, planned giving, annual fundraising? And we really customize that model for your organization. In that scenario, not only are you looking at wealth, but you're also looking at prioritizing a major gift officer's portfolio. This reduces the amount of time by about 75% that these major gift officers have to go through data and just will ultimately start doing the real job, which is cultivating those relationships instead.
Wow.
The final one is around net new audiences. So we also are the data layer associated with direct mail, social, digital, advertising. The efficacy associated with those fundraising, we've seen a 10x return within 9 months of folks utilizing us when they historically have been using Facebook lookalikes, for example, instead of really targeting the donors or the net new donors that they should be going after instead.
Amazing, yeah, it's super interesting. On the net worth, I used to be a fundraiser, so before I started fundraise, I spent 12 years in the nonprofit space, and we started implementing some like net worth sort of technology or wealth technology. And where we started first was with our recurring donors. We had like a pretty large recurring donor program, about 1,000 donors, and we found this donor who was giving them $10 a month and had like just an outrageous net worth, and lived in the middle of the country, and never met him, never had any conversations. So we started to build a relationship, and that individual went on to give 6 figures yearly after that conversation and stewardship. All that to say, I really believe in just like how wealth data can really help, especially organizations with lots of constituents, lots of records. It's hard to prioritize, like, who do you talk to, right? So the wealth indicators is a strong one.
Totally.
On the custom audience of this, is it basically you're taking like the organization's like data, existing data, and finding donors that look like the database? Is that like an oversimplified version, but is that
so that same propensity model of who's going to respond and who's going to whatever your target is, right? You want to get donors that can give up to $10,000 a year. I'm making it up here, right?
Yeah.
Well, you only have 50,000 records in your database, and yeah, we can certainly mine your existing 50,000, but what about the next 50? What about the next 100,000 people that you want to add on? Well, what we have is our household database is over 90 million households across the United States. So we're tapping that same model. Instead of applying it to your 50,000 records, we apply it to our 90 million records. And now we're going to select the right 2 million, 3 million people for you to actually serve your marketing to instead.
Oh, interesting, okay.
And so the cool part about that is that it's omni-channel. So it can be the same 3 million folks can go onto Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, direct mail, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
You can apply that data set for various campaigns.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. What's a trend as we kind of round out 22 and going into 23? What's a trend or something you're really excited about in this industry, whether it's something you guys are working on building or something that you're just seeing more in the nonprofit vertical?
So I've noticed this trend over the last like 3 or 4 years of nonprofits are getting more data-driven. So like the thesis from 6 years ago, I think the industry has started to shift quite a bit. And a thing that everybody's probably has on their mind, especially in the nonprofit ecosystem today, is the economic uncertainty.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is that nonprofits will see a decline in giving in recessionary years. But the difference here is that Americans have more cash than ever on hand. Now, the savings rate did go down in the last 2 months in terms of people tapping into those savings, but unlike any other economic environment that we've ever seen before, consumers have a lot of cash lying around, which is really great for nonprofits from a support perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that folks are going to start working a lot more intelligently than pray and spray. And it's something that even with in-person events, here we are in an in-person event starting to come back, really still keeping those processes, measurements, iterations are going to be much more important moving forward. And I think this trend has really accelerated in the last 2 years. My hope is that it continues over the next like 5 to 10.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. That's exciting. Yeah. It's a big question that we see all the time, right? From like our customers, especially is like we hear, it's Giving Tuesday, it's end of year fundraising, like are we going to see a dip? maybe I don't think this year, maybe 2023. There may be some softness sort of in like in giving, but agree with sort of that seeing the strength of the donor market, and even like in 2008, like giving did go down, but it's like it's always surprising to me that like the nonprofit industry seems to have like baked in like recession-proof like mechanics, right? And again, like yes, we may see we may see giving decrease a bit, but compared to like other industries when like tough economic times come, and I think part of the reason is just because even if you're struggling, you feel better when you're helping people and you're giving towards something. It's like an identity for so many people. And so I think I don't have like data to back it up, but I feel like that is a big driver for. We know that giving is emotional. We know that people give because they care deeply about X, Y, or Z. So it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure.
Yeah, one of the only things I would add on to that, some of the support behind that is and it's a completely different parallel, but if you're doing political contributions and you're looking at trends in the economic downturns or things of that nature, we're about to come out with our own report here over the next week or so. Current 2022 midterm fundraising by politicians is exceeding 2020.
Oh, wow.
And especially if you're targeting high net worth individuals, that is now about 74% increases through the same time period. Now, of course, leading up until Election Day, this is when it starts to all accelerate. But what's really interesting, we're just trying to understand with increases in inflation, interest rates going up, like how is that impacting consumer behavior? Because that's also parallel to a certain degree, and you don't actually get any benefit from political contributions, right, from a tax perspective.
Right.
And maybe you feel good a little bit, but like at the end of the day, the nonprofit actually is much more impactful for what you're trying to actually get after.
Yeah, interesting. So is your conclusion with that, or at least like your opinion, that at least for the short term, giving will maintain pretty healthy, pretty strong?
I think individual fundraising should, as long as, so we did one of these studies like right after COVID hit, and it was interesting. If you focus on your data in your database versus trying to do the same things that you've done historically, those folks actually outraised what they had historically done the year before.
By focusing on the people already in their database.
Correct, exactly, and tapping the hidden gems, getting that personal relationship. You already have the affinity, or you made that connection with somebody in your database already. Well, that's really interesting, right? And as you can find more folks that have that same affinity orientation, you're probably going to have a much higher success of fundraising holistically. And so that's what I think is, if the nonprofits that lean more into that actually will have a ton of success versus those that are trying to figure out or boil the ocean, do too much stuff, whatever else along those lines. Like you don't want to spend all your marketing budgets on direct mailing everybody in the database, right? That's not a good use of your energy as well. So how can you really focus on that and then double down on that moving forward?
Super interesting. All right, last few questions, the rapid fire questions. There's no wrong or right answer. Some may be more right than others, but that's okay. All right, so digital reading or actual book?
Digital reading.
Digital reading. Do you have a favorite book at the moment?
I just read, it's a completely different book. It's called Amp It Up by Frank Slootman, who's the CEO of Snowflake.
Yeah.
So another data-oriented company, and just really interesting to read his stories.
Awesome, cool. Pizza or salad?
Pizza.
If you had to live somewhere for the rest of your life, beach or mountains?
Beach.
Beach, me too. Football or football?
Football.
Yeah. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Dogs. I'm not a big cat fan. Funnel cake or cheesecake?
Cheesecake.
And the last one, the Goonies or the Sandlot?
Sandlot for sure.
Sandlot for sure. All right. We have a lot of the same responses. Appreciate it. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.